Alright, let's see if we're going. Oh, sleepy. There we are. It looks like we are going. Hello there, and welcome to another live stream. This is a live Q&A, so we'll be answering questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to those. But before we do that, we're going to go over some Korean 4-point needle technique. I had a couple people email me asking me about this, and I've been meaning... That's one of those things that's been in the back of my mind to make a video about it, but I've never gotten around to it. So we'll do like a quick, hopefully short kind of overview of 4-point needle technique and review some concepts along the way. We can review some things like the five phases, the shung and the ku cycle, and the 5 shu transport points. So that's what we're doing today, but if you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to that afterwards. But first, I'm kind of excited because I ordered a bunch of merchandise and that came in. So I got my Acupuncture is Magical t-shirt. I don't know if you can see it, but also kind of stabby. Acupuncture is magical, but also kind of stabby. So I got t-shirts now. I got a different unicorn, which is on some different things. So you can get it on a pillow. You can get it on a mug. My mug, focus. My mug actually broke, the handle broke, but I've ordered this for other people and theirs arrived just fine, so I think I just had a fluke mug. So we got that on a mug as well. And I made like I said I was going to, I made a Free the Stool mug. I don't know if you can see that very well because of my glare. Free the Stool. If you remember when we talked about downward draining herbs, one of the actions in Chinese of these herbs is these herbs free the stool. So we talk about Da Huang, and one of the actions is freeze the stool, or even our moist laxative. So I just kind of thought that was funny to put on a mug because coffee can be kind of a laxative thing as well. So that's something else you can get. So those are available on the website store. There's a link in the description below. Because it's Lunar New Year and I was out of town during Lunar New Year, we're doing a special now, so you can do Tiger 2022 to get 15% off. And so that's just, I'm excited about that. I have some more pictures, so I'll probably be posting more pictures as people get that merch and send me pictures. So it's just kind of a silly thing. I'm kind of excited about that. I went on Fiverr and hired some graphic designers to make me some things, and I thought they turned out kind of cool. So it's like this like the mug is kind of cute. That even if you don't drink out of it, it could be nice to like as a pen holder. If you have a practice, put it on your front desk, and it can be a nice little pen holder. You can also get it on little totes, to take to the grocery store. And I actually have had people that they got one of those tote bags from like a symposium, or it was like some needle manufacturer sponsored it, and they made a tote bag, and they would carry this bag around with them in Trader Joe's and stuff, and people would actually stop them and ask them, be like, oh, you do acupuncture? And she'd be like, yeah, and give them their card and things like that. So you can actually, it could be that ordering a t-shirt or ordering a tote is a good way to promote your practice. Let people know that you're an acupuncturist, that people, when you do this kind of stuff, people do actually come up and talk to you. I think I said before, like, one of the inadvertent ways I promoted myself was I did cupping on myself, and then I went to yoga. And in the locker room of Core Power Yoga, people were like, "Hey, did you get cupping?" I was like, "Yes, I did." So I'm just excited about that. So there's some links in the description below. You look a totally different person. Yes, I did shave my beard. So that's why we've been kind of gone for a while, and I haven't had any videos. Is the last couple weeks. First, I went to visit my dad in Illinois, but then I drove down to Kentucky and did some more disaster work with tornado stuff in Kentucky. Anyway, one of the policies down there is because we were around a lot of people and in vehicles. It was our policy that we had to wear N95 masks most of the time whenever we were indoors or in vehicles, and I kind of figured that if I'm wearing a mask, in order for it to work, it doesn't really work very well with a beard. So just to make the mask work and to make it more comfortable, I just went ahead and shaved, and then I shaved again today. So this is like the first time in years that I've been beardless. So that's what we're doing today. Yeah, so I don't know if I look better or worse without a beard. Maybe I look like a small child. I don't know. But that's what we're doing today. So if you have any questions, I see we have one about the emotions and spirits. We can get to that, but if you have anything more specific about what you want to know about that, let me know. Or if you have other questions, leave them in the comments. And we'll talk about 4-point needle technique. Because that's the thing a lot of people are interested in, and that's a thing that I guess it shows up on boards a lot. I guess it shows up on year ends a lot. I feel like when I took my comprehensive exams, it's like there was one question and it was kind of vague. And on boards, I don't remember if there were questions or not, but this seems to be something that people freak out about a lot. So that's something that we can go over. Make sure my buttons work. 4-point needle technique. So a lot of people have been emailing me asking me about this 4-point needle technique. So we'll do a quick overview. And this is actually kind of good because it gives us a chance to review some of the things and some other concepts that you should already know and things that might come up on your boards or year-end tests. Because when we do 4-point needle technique, if we want to understand how it works rather than just memorize a bunch of charts, but if we actually want to understand why these points do what they do, there are a few pieces that we need to put together. So before we start talking about the 4-point needle technique, we're going to go back and review some of the fundamental concepts that are going to come into play when we employ this 4-point needle technique. So the first thing we're going to want to look at is the 5 phases, or 5-phase theory. So this is something you should have talked about first semester in your fundamentals class. The first thing you talk about is yin and yang. The second thing you talk about is the 5 phases. So this is wood, fire, earth, metal, water. And when we go around in a circle like this, when we have the arrows pointing to each one, this is called the Shung cycle. The Shung cycle, the generation cycle or engendering cycle, or giving birth cycle. So we call this the Shung or the generation cycle. So wood generates fire, fire generates earth, earth generates metal, metal generates water, water generates wood, or we can say generates, engenders, or gives birth to. So for example, we could say fire generates earth, fire engenders earth, fire gives birth to earth. Or we could say that there is a mother-son relationship between fire and earth. So fire and earth stand in a mother-son relationship. And this is just some terminology we use in Chinese to describe this engendering, that one gives birth to the next. And so we can call that a mother-son relationship. So if we're just looking at two related elements along the Shung cycle, we could say, for example, here, fire is the mother and earth is the son. And that's what I mean by a mother-son relationship, just like my mother and I'm the son. Or if we're kind of focusing on one phase or one element, we can kind of branch it out that way and say that if we're talking about earth, fire is the mother of earth and metal is the son of earth. So this is another way we'll talk about mother-son relationships. We can either talk about a pair, one is the mother and one is the son, or if we look at an individual element, we can say this phase has a mother and this phase also has a son, and that's a relationship that goes along the Shung or engendering cycle. So that's one of the normal physiological cycles is the Shung cycle. The other one that we can talk about is this one that makes a star in the middle. This is the Ke cycle. The Ke cycle is the controlling cycle, or there's another word here, the keep it in check cycle. This again is a normal physiological cycle that each element balances out by controlling or restraining another phase in the cycle. So this is the Ke cycle, the controlling cycle. So here, again, if we're just focusing in on one phase, say we're talking about the earth element or the earth phase, we could say that wood is the controller of earth. So they stand in this relationship that wood controls earth, wood restrains earth, or wood keeps earth in check and keeps it from becoming overactive. So this is kind of like when we talked about yin and yang. We said, one, that yin and yang are mutually engendering. Yin engenders yang and yang engenders yin. We have the same thing happening with the 5 phases. Just instead of 2, it goes around in the circle. And we also said that yin balances out yang, or yin restrains yang and yang restrains yin. Here we have the same thing going on, that each of the 5 phases restrains or restricts or balances out one of the other phases. It just so happens that it goes around in a circle like this. The other thing we can say here is some people will call this a grandmother relationship, which kind of makes sense because if we look at our picture, we have Earth. The mother of Earth is fire. The mother of fire is wood. So your mother's mother is your grandmother. So wood is the grandmother of Earth. So this is another way of looking at it. We can say that wood is the controller of Earth, or wood is the grandmother of Earth. Now, personally, I don't actually really like the grandmother thing. I've seen a lot of people present it this way, but to me, it doesn't make much sense. Maybe it makes sense if you're thinking about like Asian culture. Apparently in Asian culture, the mother is the more nourishing one, the nice one, the one that encourages you and is nourishing, whereas the grandmother is the more lay down the law, controlling one, keeps you in check, keeps you from running wild. And I guess apparently that's a thing in Chinese culture. But for me, it just makes more sense that instead of calling it the grandmother, I like to call it the controller, because that just very clearly tells us what we're doing. Here, wood is controlling Earth. Wood is restraining Earth. Wood is keeping Earth in check. So that is the Ke cycle, or the controlling cycle. So again, these are the 2 normal physiological cycles of the 5 phases. And so these are the things that are good. They're supposed to happen. If you're studying for boards or year ends, you might want to look at the pathological cycles as well. You might want to review those, that we have the overacting cycle or over-restraining cycle, that when things over-restrain along the Ke cycle, we get things like wood overacting on earth, or fire overacting on metal. This is again in the same direction as the Ke cycle, but it's a bit too much. Then we also have the rebelling or insulting cycle, and that goes the opposite direction of the Ke cycle. So we might have situations like metal. Normally metal is supposed to restrain wood, but we can have wood rebelling against metal, or wood insulting metal, like you have liver qi stagnation, and that causes you to have a cough. That's the insulting or rebelling cycle. So those are the pathological cycles, but for us, when we're talking about 4-point needle technique, we're just interested in the 2 physiological cycles. The sheng cycle, the generating cycle. Each phase generates or engenders the next phase in the sequence. And the Ke, or controlling cycle. Each phase controls, restrains, or keeps in check another phase along the cycle. So that is the 5 phases, and that's kind of the first piece of the puzzle that we need in order to understand Korean 4-point needle technique. That we're starting with this theory of the 5 phases. We need to understand the sheng cycle, the engendering cycle, and the Ke cycle, or the controlling cycle. So that is step 1, puzzle piece number 1. Number 2, what we need to know is the 5 Shu transport points. The 5 Shu transport points. The Jingwell, Ying Spring, Shu Stream, Jing River, He Sea points. This is something that we went over at the very beginning of points. This is usually like your 2nd or 3rd lecture in points 1 class. We talk about point categories, and we talk about the 5 Shu transport points. And this is describing how the channel grows and develops as it moves from the tips of the fingers towards the trunks. It appears at the wells and it rushes down. It gets wider and deeper until it disappears or goes deep at the seas. And it turns out each of these points has a certain action related to how the qi is flowing at that particular point. And so that's something we discussed in points 1. What we're interested in here is not necessarily those actions related to the qi flow. We're interested in the 5-phase correspondences between the 5 shu transport points and the 5 phases. So this is something that happens all the time in Chinese medicine. There are 5 phases, and whenever we have 5 of something, we put them together. So there are 5 shu transport points. Each one of these shu transport points is associated with or corresponds to one of the 5 phases. Now, because Chinese medicine is very difficult, it can never be easy, it turns out these correspondences or associations are different depending on whether we're dealing with a yin channel or a yang channel. So that's why we have 2 columns over here, because these correspondences are different depending on whether we're dealing with yin channels or yang channels. So let's start by looking at the yin channels. We say the wells are associated with wood, the springs are associated with fire, the streams with earth, the rivers with metal, and the seas with water. So why is this? Well, it turns out this question is asked very directly in the Nanjing. Why is it that the wells start with wood? And the answer goes like this. It says, wood is associated with the eastern regions and with spring. That is the season when all things come to life. It's when the Jue insects start to breathe, the Chuan insects start to wriggle, and the Ran insects start to fly. All things that come to life must come to life in the spring. So basically, in spring, that's the season when things begin. The bears come out of hibernation, the birds start flapping their wings, and life begins. So wood represents beginnings. We can also say in terms of the 4 directions, wood is associated with the east. That's the direction of the rising sun. That's when the day begins. So wood represents beginnings, and the wells are where the channels begin and start to grow. So that's why the wells are associated with wood. After that, we just go along the Sheng cycle. Wood generates fire, fire generates earth, earth generates metal, metal generates water, and then it goes back to wood. So that should be fairly simple to remember when we're talking about the yin channels. Just remember we always start with wood because wood represents beginnings, and then we just go along the Sheng cycle, and it's really easy. What makes it more difficult is the yang channels are different. Why are the yang channels different? Well, it turns out this is also in the Nanjing. Right after that, they're like, why is it that the yin channels and the yang channels have different 5-phase associations? And it turns out the real answer in the Nanjing has to do with the 10 heavenly stems and branches, and I don't really know very much about the heavenly stems and branches, but one of the commentators makes some statement about yin and yang must be paired, hardness and softness must be paired, like husband and wife. And so we can see here that between the yin channels and the yang channels, because they're yin and yang, they can't be the same, they have to be separate. And so we have these kind of pairs of hardness and softness, that wood and metal, wood is more soft, metal is more hard, things like that. Really, maybe it's just easier to remember that the yang channels begin with metal, and then again, we're just going along the Sheng cycle. Metal generates water, water, wood, wood, fire, and so on. So that one for the yang channels, we just have to remember that the wells start with metal, and then we go along the Sheng cycle. Or some people like to go, instead of looking at the wells, they like to look at the springs, because the yin springs are fire and water. Fire and water are yin and yang, and then you just have to switch them. But anyway, another thing we can look at is we can notice that between the yang channels and the yin channels, this relationship follows the ke cycle, or the controlling cycle. So when we look at the wells, metal controls wood because metal chops down trees. Water controls fire because water puts out the fire. Wood controls earth because the roots of the tree are digging through the earth and pulling apart the earth. So we can also say that there's a relationship here along the Ke cycle between the yang channels and the yin channels. But again, this is something that when we do our 4-point needle technique, this is the second piece of the puzzle. This is a thing that we need to be very familiar with and very comfortable with if we're going to know how to do this 4-point needle technique. So this is piece number 2, is knowing the 5-phase correspondences between the 5 shoe transport points and the 5 elements. The other thing we need to know here is that there is something called a Harare point. A Harare point. And maybe a wordy way I like to describe the Harare point, when the 5-phase correspondence of a point matches the 5-phase correspondence of the channel on which it lies, that point is called a Harare point. Now that's a lot of words that maybe didn't make sense. Really what we mean is the metal point on the metal channel is the Harare point. The wood point on the wood channel is the Harare point. The fire point on the fire channel is the Harare point. So things like lung 8 is the metal point on the metal channel, so lung 8 is the Harare point on the lung channel. Liver 1 is the wood point on the wood channel, so it's the Harare point. Heart 8 is the fire point on the fire channel, so it's the Harare point, and so on. And I think this term Harare, I mean, it doesn't sound very Chinese to me. I'm not sure who decided to call it this, but I believe Harare it comes from French horaire. Horaire means like a schedule or a timetable. So when it has to do when we were talking about the clock of the lung is 3 to 5 a.m., the large intestine is 5 to 7. That's like a clock or a timetable. In French, that's horaire. And then apparently in English, we somehow came up with the term Harare point. That's my best guess. I'm not sure what they call it in Chinese though. We always just call it a Harare point. So this is again something that's going to come up when we talk about our 4-point needle technique. We're going to need to know what a Harare point is, and so we're going to need to be familiar with each channel. Which point is the Harare point? Which is the point where the point of on the 5 shoe, the element matches the element of the channel. So that's kind of our second piece is we need to know the 5 phases, and then we need to know the 5-phase correspondences with the 5 shoe transport points. So we got these 5 phases: wood, earth, fire, metal, water. We know that they go along the sheng cycle, that one generates the next. We know that there's a ke cycle where one restrains the other. Then we know that we have these points that are associated with the 5 phases. But how does that help us with treatment? I mean, it's like great, we learn these fundamentals. How does this actually help us clinically? How does this help us treat our patients? Well, that gives us kind of our final piece or final pieces of the puzzle is how do we actually put this together for treatment? And to kind of make it work, we're relying on a very basic statement from the Nanjing. This is from chapter 69 of the Nanjing. In cases of deficiency, tonify the mother. In cases of excess, drain the child or drain the son. And so this gives us some basic theory about the method of filling and draining, or the method of tonification and sedation. And so hopefully these make sense. We say in cases of deficiency, tonify the mother. And so hopefully this makes sense to you. If you think about if one of those phases is deficient, what you can do is go upstream and throw in stuff there, tonify there, and then because of the engendering cycle, that stuff that you fill will then flow into the thing that's deficient and tonify. So if we go upstream, up the river, and throw some stuff in, it will flow downstream into the thing that needs tonification. In cases of excess, drain the child. Well, now if this thing is excess, we go downstream and start pulling things out, and then things will flow along that sheng cycle. That excess will flow into the next one, and we're kind of pulling it out indirectly from there. So hopefully, when you look at the circle of the sheng cycle, this should make sense. If the thing is deficient, tonify the mother so it can flow into it. If the thing is excess, drain the child so things can flow away. So again, if you think about this like rivers and water, hopefully that makes sense. So this gives us a very basic method for tonification and sedation. So this one comes from the Nanjing. It turns out for our 4-point needle technique, we're actually going to add one more. This one is not, as far as I know, is not in the classics. But if we wanted to word it in a similar way, maybe we could go like this. Oh, sorry, I actually made some slides to explain what I was saying. So let's say here as an example, we have earth is deficient. We want to tonify the mother because then things will flow downstream into earth. And in cases of excess, drain the sun. So if earth is excess, we take things out from metal and that will cause things to flow downstream into there. I don't know if that just made sense. Sorry, I'm not very good with my slides today. So that's in cases of deficiency, tonify the mother. In cases of excess, drain the sun. But it turns out when we do our 4-point needle technique, we're going to have to add in one more. This is not from the classics, but if we wanted to word it similarly, we can say, in cases of excess, tonify the controller. In cases of deficiency, drain the controller or sedate the controller. So here we have a treatment principle, but instead of going along the shung cycle with a mother-son relationship, here we're creating a treatment principle that goes along the ke cycle or the controlling cycle. And again, hopefully this makes sense, that when we look at this controlling cycle, here's an example of wood controls earth. Wood restrains earth. It keeps it in check. Well, if earth is in excess, we want to tonify the controller. If earth is wild, it's a wild child, it's screaming, it's running around, it's out of control, we're going to strengthen the controller so that it can exert its control. It can restrain that excess. If we have this child running around where it's like we're tightening the leash on that child, this is why I don't have children. You guess don't put your children on leashes, I guess, or collars. But if we strengthen that controller, that will enable it to keep the other phase in check. So in cases of excess, tonify the controller. Now the other way around is say that earth is deficient, it's weak, it's not free to express itself. Well, there we need to diminish the control, we need to drain the controller, we need to loosen the leash so that the element can flourish. So this is kind of our second basic treatment principle of, in cases of excess, tonify the controller so it can exert more control and bring it in check. In cases of deficiency, drain the controller, make the controller weaker so it's not over-restraining the element. So that's kind of our principle here. And so when we do our 4-point needle technique, even though it's 4 needles, we're actually using 2 treatment strategies. So 2 treatment strategies gives us our 4 needles. So when you think about 4-point needle technique, you really just have to think of these 2 strategies, that this idea of, in cases of deficiency, tonify the mother, drain, in cases of excess, drain the child, or along the ke cycle, in cases of excess, tonify the controller, in cases of deficiency, drain the controller. So we put these together in our 4-point needle technique. When we do our 4-point needle technique, we're really just dealing with either deficiency or excess. And this is kind of a good point to make, that when we're talking about 4-point needle technique, basically we're talking about a channel or an organ, and that channel is either deficient or excess. That's it. That's as far as we're going. That's as simple as we want to be. So when people talk about, when do we actually use 4-point needle technique? What if I have a kidney and heart not communicating? What if I have liver overacting on spleen with dampness overflowing? That's not really what we're talking about. When we do 4-point needle technique, we're talking about a channel, an excess, or deficiency. So we're not talking about liver overacting on spleen with underlying kidney deficiency. We're not doing that. We're talking about spleen deficiency. That's our diagnosis. Gallbladder excess. That's our diagnosis. Kidney deficiency. We need to tonify the kidney. How do we do it? That's what we're talking about with 4-point needle technique. So we're either dealing with deficiency or excess, one of these two situations. So like we said, in deficiency, we can say, in cases of deficiency, tonify the mother. That's what we said with our non-Jing statement. With our second statement, we also said, in cases of deficiency, drain the controller. So these are two treatment strategies that we'll be utilizing in cases of deficiency. Notice that one is a strategy that goes along the shung cycle, the generation cycle. The other is a treatment strategy that goes along the ke cycle or controlling cycle. So one is shung, one is ke, one is tonifying, and one is draining. So that's for deficiency. Say we have a case of excess. We have gallbladder excess, liver excess, UB excess. What do? How do we drain that excess? Well, like we said from the non-Jing, in cases of excess, drain the child, drain the son. And then from our extra statement along the ke cycle, we said, in cases of excess, tonify the controller. When we tonify the controller, it's able to restrain or bring down the thing that's excess. So again, here we have two treatment strategies. One is a treatment strategy that follows the shung cycle or generation cycle, and one is a treatment strategy that goes along the ke cycle or controlling cycle. So basically these are our two situations. Even though we say 4-point needle technique, in each situation we're dealing with two treatment strategies. In cases of deficiency, we're doing something with the shung cycle, we're doing something with the ke cycle, we're tonifying something and we're draining something. Same thing with excess. We're doing something along the shung cycle, we're doing something along the ke cycle. One thing is tonifying, one thing is draining. That's what they have in common when we're dealing with both. So if we want to go through how do we actually do this, let's talk about an example. Let's say we have spleen deficiency. And again, this is our diagnosis, spleen deficiency. Our treatment principle is to tonify the spleen. We're not talking about spleen Qi deficiency with dampness overflowing, with underlying kidney yang deficiency, with liver overacting. We're just saying spleen deficiency. Our treatment strategy is tonify the spleen. How do we do it? Again, when we look at the 5 phases, there are 2 ways we can do it. One of them happens along the shung cycle, one of them happens along the ke cycle. So we look at the spleen over there, we start looking at the shung cycle, we tonify the mother. The mother of the spleen is earth, the mother is fire. So we tonify fire. When we add energy into that fire phase, it's going to flow downstream along the shung cycle and fill up the spleen. So we tonify the mother. Our second treatment strategy is to drain the controller. So we have spleen is earth, wood controls earth, so we're going to drain wood. That wood is supposed to be restraining earth and keeping it in check, but we're going to actually weaken that restraint so that earth can flourish. So we're going to drain the controller. So those are our 2 treatment strategies. Here's the thing. I just said we have 2 treatment strategies, and those 2 treatment strategies give us 4 needles. How do we go from 2 treatment strategies to 4 needles? Well, it's like this. When we say tonify the mother, we're going to use 2 needles to do that. And the way we tonify the mother is by 2 different ways. Number 1, we're going to tonify the mother point on the affected channel. So we talked about the 5 shoe points have the 5 phases associated with it. So if we have spleen deficiency, we're going to go to the spleen channel and use the fire point on the spleen channel because fire is the mother of earth. So we're going to tonify the mother point on the affected channel. Number 2, this is the weird one, we're going to tonify the Harare point on the mother channel. So in our example, spleen is earth, the mother of earth is fire, that's heart. We're going to use the Harare point on the heart channel, the fire point on the fire channel. And so that's how we get our 2 points. When we say drain the controller, this means 2 things. When we say drain the controller, we're going to drain the controlling point on the channel. So again, the spleen is our affected channel. We're going to go to the spleen channel and find the controlling point, find the wood point on the spleen channel, stick our needle in that and use a draining technique. We're also going to drain the Harare point on the controlling channel. So again, we have spleen. We're going to go to the controlling channel, which is the liver, and we're going to do the Harare point on the liver channel. Liver 1 is the wood point on the wood channel. So that's why we have, when we're dealing with deficiency, we have 2 treatment techniques, but each treatment technique has 2 needles associated with it. That gives us our 4 needles for 4-point needle technique. And that was just really confusing. I hope I didn't lose you there. So this takes looking at some charts and some pictures. So when we say tonify the mother, in the cases of spleen deficiency, the mother is fire. Fire is the mother of earth. So when we tonify the mother point on the affected channel, we're going to tonify the fire point on the spleen channel. What is the fire point on the spleen channel? Spleen 2. Yin spring points are fire. So spleen 2 is the fire point on the spleen channel. That's tonifying the mother. Then we're going to tonify the Harare point on the mother channel. Again, the mother is fire. The mother channel is the heart. We need the Harare point on the heart channel. That is heart 8. Heart 8 is the fire point on the fire channel. So those are the 2 points that we tonify. When we say drain the controller, we're talking about spleen deficiency. Spleen is earth. The controller of earth is wood. So when we say drain the controller, we're going to drain wood. How do we drain wood? We do it by 2 ways. We drain the controlling point on the channel. So our affected channel is the spleen channel. We're going to go to the wood point on the spleen channel. What is the wood point on the spleen channel? It's spleen 1. Jingwell points are wood in nature. So we drain spleen 1. We use a draining technique with our needling. Then number 2, what we're going to do is drain the Harare point on the controlling channel. The controller of the spleen is the liver. We're going to go to the liver channel and drain the Harare point on the liver channel, which is liver 1. Liver 1 is the wood point on the wood channel. So those are our 4 points for spleen deficiency. So maybe we can draw a picture and maybe this makes it easier. Maybe it makes it weirder because maybe instead of heart, I should have put fire. Anyway, we're dealing with spleen deficiency. Our treatment principle then is to tonify the spleen. How do we tonify the spleen? Well, we do it by 2 ways. One way goes along the shung cycle or generation cycle. One way goes along the ke cycle or the controlling cycle. So for along the shung cycle, we say in cases of deficiency, tonify the mother. So spleen is deficient, we tonify the mother. The mother is fire. Then we also say along the ke cycle, in cases of deficiency, drain the controller. When we take away power from the controller, it can no longer over-restrain the spleen. So we're going to drain wood or drain the liver. So those are our 2 treatment strategies. We're tonifying the mother and draining the controller. When we say tonify the mother, how do we do it? We tonify the mother point on the channel. We tonify the fire point on the spleen channel, which is spleen 2. Then we tonify the Harare point on the mother channel. The mother channel is heart. The Harare point on the heart channel is heart 8. Fire point on the fire channel. When we go to our second treatment strategy, drain the controller of earth is wood. So we drain the wood point on the spleen channel, which is spleen 1. And then we drain the Harare point on the controlling channel, the Harare point of the liver channel, which is liver 1, the wood point on the wood channel. And so that gives us our point selection, our 4 needles to tonify the spleen. So as I'm saying that out loud, it sounds really confusing. So I don't know if you got any of that, but this is this is kind of the way we can try to understand this technique. Some people, they just draw out a chart and they try to memorize the 4 points for all of the 12 channels. That's a lot to memorize. I would say if you remember this idea of, in cases of deficiency, tonify the mother, in cases of deficiency, drain the controller, then you can use your 5-phase correspondences. You can look at your circle of the shung and the ke cycle. Hopefully you can write out the big picture and you know the 5 Shu transport points and the 5-phase correspondences. So if you're going into a test, maybe draw out your circle of your 5 phases, write out your table of the big picture, and then you can use those two to recreate these point prescriptions for each of these situations. So if we take another example here, where if we have excess and we want to drain it, again, say our diagnosis is gallbladder excess. We have a channel or organ and excess or deficiency. So this is not liver gallbladder overacting on earth. This is not gallbladder invading the stomach. This is not gallbladder heart dual vacuum. This is just gallbladder excess. Our diagnosis is gallbladder excess. We took the pulse, we felt the gallbladder channel, there's too much stuff in the gallbladder channel, we need to drain that excess. We have gallbladder excess. Our treatment principle is drain the gallbladder. We want to use 4-point needle technique. What do we do? Well, again, when we want to drain the gallbladder, here we're looking, gallbladder is wood. We switched everything to the yang channels. We don't have the yin channels, now we have the yang channels listed in our 5 phases. We want to drain the gallbladder. Our first treatment principle is going to go along the shung cycle. But here we say, in cases of excess, drain the child. In cases of excess, drain the child. So if we go downstream and drain things out, that will cause things to flow out of the gallbladder. So if we go to the fire element and drain things out of fire, then wood will have to give up some of that excess to balance out the system. So in cases of excess, drain the sun, drain the child, which in this case is fire. Then we have a treatment strategy along the ke cycle. In cases of excess, tonify the controller. Gallbladder is excess, gallbladder is overactive, gallbladder is wild. We need to exert more control on the gallbladder and bring it into check. How do we do that? We tonify the controller. We give the controller more strength so it can bring that gallbladder back into place. So in this case, gallbladder is wood. The controller of wood is metal, because metal chops down trees like an axe. So those are 2 treatment strategies. We drain the child and tonify the controller. So when I say drain the child, how do we do that? What do I mean when I say drain the child? I mean, number 1, drain the child point on the channel. So with gallbladder, we want to go to the child is fire. We want the fire point on the gallbladder channel, which is gallbladder 38. Then number 2, we drain the Harare point on the child channel, the Harare point on the sun channel. Here, the sun of the gallbladder is the small intestine. We need the Harare point, the fire point on the fire channel, which is small intestine 5. So we're going to drain those 2 points. We're going to needle and use a draining technique to drain those points. Our second treatment strategy is, if the gallbladder is in excess, we're going to tonify the controller. What do I mean when I say tonify the controller? I mean 2 things. Number 1, we're going to tonify, well, the controller here is metal. We're dealing with wood. The controller of wood is metal. So number 1, we're going to tonify the metal point on the gallbladder channel. The metal point on the gallbladder channel is gallbladder 44. Remember, we said on yang channels, the Jing well is metal, so gallbladder 44. So number 1, tonify the metal point on the gallbladder channel. Number 2, tonify the Harare point on the controlling channel. So here, metal controls wood. The metal channel is the large intestine. We need to tonify the Harare point on the large intestine channel, and that's going to be large intestine 1, because again, on yang channels, the Jing well is metal. So the metal point on the metal channel is large intestine 1. So those are our points for gallbladder excess. When you want to drain the gallbladder, those are the 4 needles we're going to use. We're going to use a draining technique on the sun points. We're going to use a tonifying technique on the controlling points. And that's an example of draining excess using our 4-point needle technique. So again, I'm not sure how much this actually comes up. This is something that, at least when I was in school, we just kind of tacked this on to the end of points 3, and this is something that everybody freaked out about, that nobody really understood, and they thought they had to memorize these long charts of how to do 4-point needle technique. But again, usually when you take a test, you get a scratch sheet of paper. I think if you're taking nationals, they don't give you paper. Maybe they give you a dry erase board. I don't know. But you have some scratch sheet of paper. If you draw out the 5 phases, if you write out your big picture and you know your 5 chute transport points, you should be able to recreate these 4 needles. And so maybe a few things that can help if you're like taking a test and you come up against one of these questions. Number 1, something we should pay attention to is when we have yin channels, we always use yin points. When we have yang channels, we always use yang points. So we saw this here, that when we're dealing with gallbladder, these are all yang points. When we're dealing with spleen, these are all yin points. So if you're taking a test and one of your answers has a mixture of yin and yang points, if we're talking about spleen deficiency and answer D says spleen 3, large intestine 1, spleen 5, gallbladder 2, you know that that's wrong because you don't mix yin and yang points. So if you're dealing with a spleen thing or a heart thing or a liver thing, you should only see points on yin channels. If you're dealing with a gallbladder issue, a small intestine issue, a urinary bladder issue, you should only see points on yang channels. They should never be mixed. So if you're taking a test and you want to eliminate some wrong answers, if you see a mixture of yin and yang points, cross that one out. That cannot be the correct answer. The other thing we can notice is because of our techniques, when you talk about something along the Shung cycle and something along the Ke cycle, that means whichever one is affected, we're going to see 2 of those points. If the spleen channel is afflicted, we better see 2 spleen points and 2 points that are different. If the gallbladder is afflicted, we better see 2 gallbladder points and 2 other points that are not the same. If we're dealing with kidney, whether it's deficiency or excess, we better see 2 kidney points and 2 other points that are not the same. So that's another one where if you're taking a test and it's asking about 4-point needle technique and whatever organ or channel is afflicted, if it's spleen 1, heart 8, liver 3, heart 1, it's like if they're all different points, you can cross that out because you have to have 2 points that are the same. You have to have 2 points that are on the channel that's being affected. So that's another way you can just cross out things that are wrong. And then maybe you can just remember that if you're doing this 4-point needle technique, 2 of these points, first of all, 2 of them have to be on the channel. The other 2 have to be Harare points. So maybe you can just go and verify that I see 2 spleen points. The other 2 points are heart 8 and liver 1. Because they're not on the spleen, they better be Harare points. Is heart 8 a Harare point? Is liver 1 a Harare point? Yes, we're probably good to go. If you're looking at it and it's not a Harare point, you can probably cross that one out. So again, whether we're dealing with excess or deficiency, for our 4-point needle technique, we need to see 2 points that are on the channel, and we need to see 2 points that are different. We're not going to have 2 large intestine points and we're not going to have 2 small intestine points. They need to be different points and they need to be Harare points. So 2 points that are on the channel, 2 points that are Harare points. So you can just look at your big picture. If you have 2 points that are not Harare points, cross that one out. That's not going to be the correct answer. Then I will say I have seen, like, people have asked me about questions that are like weird questions when they talk about like liver overacting on spleen. So they'll do a combination of draining the liver and tonifying the spleen, and that's not entirely 4-point needle technique, so that might throw you off a little bit. But we're still using these treatment principles of tonify the mother, drain the son, and things like that. So some of those things may or may not work, but that's what I got for 4-point needle technique, Korean 4-point needle technique. That seemed really confusing to me. It makes sense in my head, but it's really hard to verbalize. So hopefully that made some sort of sense. Hopefully when you draw out the pictures, you'll be able to understand it, and hopefully you won't have to memorize those charts. And let's be honest, hopefully you don't get a lot of questions on this on your test. So that is 4-point needle technique. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I don't know, is that any good? Let me know if that actually made any sense. It's like I said, that's something that made sense in my head. When I said it out loud, I feel like I was just like, here, mother, child, sun, fire, metal, earth, and it didn't make any sense. So maybe we'll clip out that portion and make it a separate video, and you can watch that again. So that's all I have to say about 4-point needle technique. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have other questions, let me know, and we can... Oh geez, 50 minutes. That took a long time. I wanted it to be a short explanation. I'm not sure there's a way to do a short explanation of that. So if you have any other questions not related, let me know. I'd love to hear your take on entry-exit blocks. I guess, what about them? What do you like? Do you like an explanation of what they are, or I'm not sure. I'm not really sure I have a take, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like, what's your opinion? I like doing them. So if we need to talk more about that, we can. Can you please talk about needle around the dragon? Basically, yeah, surround the dragon. So that's just a technique we use. We call it surround the dragon. Basically, is my understanding of this, I guess I'm not sure I've ever seen this in a textbook or anything. It's just something that we say in clinic. We say surround the dragon. Is basically, if you have something going on, you stick a bunch of needles around the thing, usually pointed towards the thing. So if somebody has a bruise, it's like you want that chi to go to that area. You want healing chi to enter that area. How do you get chi to enter that area? You stick needles in there. When you stick needles in there, that's where the chi goes. But if you got a big bruise, it's probably going to hurt if you needle into a bruise. You don't want to do that. So instead, you just needle around the bruise, usually with needles pointing towards it, and that will bring chi to the area and help it. And so this is something you can do with lots of different, if you have a sore, if you have like a wound that won't heal, maybe, or even like a muscle knot or a pulled muscle or something like that you don't want to go into the area. Instead of needling into the area, you can go around it. Maybe the person has some sort of infection and you don't want to deal with what's that thing where you infect someone with something they did themselves? Autogenous infection or autogenous infection, as opposed to cross infection. Maybe they have some skin infection. You don't want to stick a needle in there because it might do weird things. It might drive the infection further in. You needle around it, and you just have your needles usually pointing inwards. If somebody has shingles and it's really sensitive, they don't want any stimulation on the area, you can needle around it. That's called surround the dragon. So it's just kind of it hurts here, I'm going to stick needles there. So it's kind of like sure points, but instead of on the point, it's around the point. I'm not sure if there's anything deeper to it than that. Yeah, great topic. Love Korean 4-point needle technique, especially community group settings. Yeah, I think that's something they do a lot. We talked to a guy, Zach, from Pocatech. He does only community acupuncture, and I think that's something they do. Here we're talking about the economy of needles. Yeah, that's one thing because you're only using 4 points, so it's like It's cheap on your needles. But also, I think it would be especially good for a community setting because, again, we're dealing with the 5 shoe transport points. All of those points are below the elbow and below the knee. So if you're in a community setting where a person is sitting in a chair, sitting in a recliner, you probably can't get to back shoe points. You may not be able to get to Ren points. You may not be able to get to, you can't have them disrobe, but you can get to the 5 shoe transport points. So if you're doing community acupuncture, you probably need to be super familiar with antique points or the 5 shoe transport points. And this is probably something that you're going to want to use. Do you use Korean 4-point needle technique often? Personally, I mean, sometimes I have a lot, and this is something that we did a podcast with a different Zachary Louis, and he saw I was doing this, and I think he teaches his classes specifically on 4-point needle technique. So I wanted to do a podcast with him because at least when I went to school, it seemed like this is something we learned at the end of points 3. It's something that people freaked out about on the test, and people got all anxious about what is 4-point needle technique, how do we use it? Then we got to the clinic, nobody uses it. Nobody uses it clinically. And I think that's just, to some extent, I think people are afraid to only use 8 needles on a patient. It's like the patient is going to be unhappy. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I think that if you're studying J.R. Worsley 5-element, they sometimes do 4-point needle technique directly, but some of the other things they do look a lot like 4-point needle technique. When you talk about like husband-wife blocks and how they transfer energy, some of it looks or kind of employs those similar concepts. Or a lot of Japanese style, when their point combinations are maybe not directly 4-point needle technique, but it still uses that same concept of mother-son points and things like that. So I think it's still good to think in that 5-element phase, think about the Sheng and the Ke cycle, and think about the 5-shoe transport points. Do you bleed Jing wells? As far as I know, that in the 4-point needle technique, you do normal needling, and that's you can needle Jing wells and not bleed them. So I would think that you would just do normal needling, but you can still use a tonifying or draining technique. Because again, sometimes like we had in our example, we're tonifying, we might be tonifying Jing well points, and so you wouldn't bleed to tonify, so you still want to use a tonifying technique. I think maybe in Japanese they would do like akabani or use incense sticks on the Jing wells, or they might do contact needling or something like that. But I'll have to talk to Zach when he talks about what kind of techniques he does, because he probably knows more about that than I do. I guess Joe doesn't like me beardless, which is totally fine. But I guess Alex does like me beardless. I don't know. Sometimes it's just a thing I do to switch things up. But I haven't shaved in years, so that's something I do. In 5-element, there's a consideration of emotional presentation in diagnosing entry-exit blocks. As far as I know, that is not true. As far as I know, entry-exit blocks are diagnosed using the pulse. I think there will often be an emotional presentation. So like if a person has a liver-lung block, it was probably the case that they had a very stressful event that caused that blockage to happen. If a person has a liver-lung block, they might have some presentation of an emotional thing. But as far as I know, when it comes to actually diagnosing those blockages, it's primarily done through the pulse. And I think that's true of all blockages, whether we're talking about entry-exit blocks or husband-wife blocks, CVGV blocks, things like that. But again, disclaimer, I am not a 5-element practitioner, so I don't know much about that. I'm probably just talking out my ass, but this is just something having followed around a 5-element practitioner for 1 semester, that was the impression I got, is that those blockages are diagnosed primarily through the pulse. And the way you can think about it is, again, think about a river. We have chi flowing in the circle: lung, large intestine, stomach, spleen, heart, SI, UB, kidney, pericardium, sandra, gallbladder, liver, and back to lung. And these are like water pipes, or these are like rivers. Suppose you have a river flowing along, and then suddenly there's a blockage. Some beaver came along and dumped a bunch of logs in the middle of your river. You got this blockage. What's going to happen? Well, at the part before the blockage, the water is going to swell up before the blockage, but then after the blockage, the water is going to, because the water is not flowing smoothly, it's going to come down. So the water level before the blockage is going to come up. The water level after the blockage is going to come down. That's what you feel in the pulse. If you have a blockage between liver and lung, there's that blockage there. The liver is going to become full and come up, so you're going to feel fullness in the liver pulse. The lung is going to come down, and because the chi is not flowing through, so you're going to feel deficiency in the lung pulse. And so that's how you know there's a blockage. As far as I know, those are diagnosed through the pulse. Oh, in my Korean 4 needle class, they told us to bleed the Jingwell points. Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, it's like again, that's kind of like I learned this in a week at the end of points 3. And so I'm just curious, like I said, sometimes we tonify those points. What methods of tonification would you use? Because I think of bleeding as a method of draining. So if you're bleeding a Jingwell point, I would think of that as a draining technique. And so I'm just curious, how do you tonify? Do you just needle and retain? Do you do moxa, or do you do akabani? I'm curious what they told you about if you needed to tonify a Jingwell point, what technique would you use? How about a big no. I think I once grew a goatee, ironically, because I was dressing up as my anatomy teacher for Halloween. Other than that, no goatee, no mustache. Oh, can we have access to this? Oh yeah, I just made those in a half an hour today. If you really want them, I can try to upload the slides, but I didn't think they were all that good. So here, could you please talk about the emotions and the spirits in TCM? So here we're talking about the 7 emotions, or the 7 affects, which is really annoying because there are 5 elements or 5 yin organs, yet there are 7 emotions. That's kind of annoying. And the 5 spirits. So we talk about the heart houses the shen, the lung houses the po, the liver houses the hun, the kidney houses the zhi. Which one am I forgetting? The heart houses the shen, the hun, the po, the zhi, the spleen houses the yi, the intellect. And then we can talk about how the emotions affect those organs. I don't know what you want. I guess do you if you have any specific questions. This is something we kind of go over whenever we go over a channel. I usually mention that at the beginning. Like if you go to the that video on the lung channel, we kind of say something briefly about the lung houses the pool, the corporeal soul, and the lung is associated with grief. And then we talk about how at least from an acupuncture point of view, what that means and how that works. I think in the liver channel we talked a lot about anger, and anger, stress, frustration, different equivalents of anger. Also interesting, depression was usually the part of that too. So we talked about the emotions there, and we talked a little about the hun. The hun is kind of weird. So I don't know if you have any specific questions about that. And again, could you talk more about pulsing? Yeah, I was gonna say what do you have any specific? Do you have any specific questions about pulse? Because again, there's a video on the YouTube channel about taking the pulse, which goes over some basics of how to take the pulse. So that might be something to look at. Let's see if I can find that. If you type in pulse diagnosis, does it come up? Yeah, if you go to YouTube and type in pulse diagnosis, it's the first thing that comes up. Look at that. Look at how good I am at SEO, or rather, look at how few videos there are on TCM. So if you go in and type pulse diagnosis, that is one of the first videos. One of the earlier videos I made back. This is back in California. I had a beard. This is something that I think some people. This is the one where I got some comments like, I gesture too much with my hands, so I tend to talk fast and gesture too much with my hands. So I feel like there were some comments about that. So so basically, like, there are 65 comments. I think 62 of them are positive, and I remember the 2 negative ones that talk about me gesturing too emphatically. But so if you have any other specific, it's hard to just be like, pulse diagnosis. That's something you can go on for hours about. So I don't know if you have any specific questions about that. If you have anything specific, let me know. About how the hoon exits the body when the liver is affected. And this is one of those things that I really don't know a whole lot about. That if you look into, when we talk about like the liver and the hoon, when you look at, if you go looking in the classics, there might be things about the classics. When you look about, I think especially in Taoism, there might be things about this sort of thing. And this is one of those things I remember, like when I was in my first semester, I had a teacher who I considered to be a very scholarly person. He was very well versed in the classics. He read classical Chinese, and I remember I asked him some weird off the wall question, and he was just like, you know what? I don't know. The answer exists. I'm sure the answer exists somewhere. If you want that answer, you might have to read Chinese. But he said, but it's like, honestly, I don't know, just because it's not very clinically applicable to me. And so I kind of feel that way. A lot of things we say about like the hoon, it's kind of a question of to what extent is it clinically applicable. And so sometimes I've heard Taoists talk about things like, when you die, the corporeal soul leaves immediately, but the hoon stays around for 3 days or something like. There's like weird stuff like that where I'm like, I'm not sure that's very relevant to me diagnostically. Oh yeah, so we were talking about when the pool dies, dies with the body, and what happens to the other spirits. Again, I don't know. I think I vaguely remember reading some Taoist thing, and that it's like when you die, the pool dissipates immediately because it's more with the body, whereas the hoon will stick around for 2 or 3 days. The shen, who knows? I don't know. So that might be kind of a Taoist thing. But in terms of TCM, I don't know, just because it's not really clinically applicable. I think really clinically, when you talk about the hoon, to some extent, like we said in that liver channel video, the hoon has to do with courage. Like when you make plans, and you need the courage to follow through with those plans. So if you have a strong hoon, you can make plans and follow through and have good courage. If your hoon is out of control, maybe you have either too little courage, you're too timid. Sometimes we associate that with the gallbladder and gallbladder qi deficiency. Or maybe you have too much courage and you become reckless. That can be, we can say that's something about the hoon. And then I also mentioned something about, I feel like this just comes up when we talk about insomnia, that usually when we talk about insomnia, we're talking about something with a heart. There's heart heat, fire entering the heart, phlegm misting the heart. There's heart blood deficiency, so the shen can't come home. There are certain patterns that have to do with the liver, and I feel like the hoon is just a convenient way to explain why the liver can cause insomnia. We say, oh, the hoon is out wandering around and it hasn't come home to the liver. So that's why liver fire can also cause insomnia. So I feel like that's the extent we talk about the hoon. I mean, it's like same thing with the pool. We talk about, oh, the pool is a corporeal soul. It's like, when do you use that? Like, I don't think there are any herbs that tonify the corporeal soul. Usually in acupuncture, we just talk about the pool because lung 3 is good for grief. That's kind of the extent that it comes up. And I think I have it on my floor here, the Wang Juyi book. The Wang Juyi book, Applied Channel Theory, does have some brief statements about those spirits and more how we use them in acupuncture and how they're applied clinically. But if we're talking about more esoteric things about what happens to your or what happens to your willpower, or what happens to your intellect when you die, I just don't know much about that. I'm sorry. Lose the unicorn shirt. I'm really excited about this unicorn shirt. Go buy my unicorn shirt. Support the channel by buying a unicorn shirt. Gestures are fine. Yeah, no, it's like when I first started, there was a thing where it's like, if you go back and watch my very first video, I think it's a warm the interior video, it's really weird and really awkward. It's like, it takes a while to develop camera presence. So my first one was like, my first couple were very stiff and very awkward. So I tried to be more energetic, and my way of being more energetic was gesturing a lot. And I think I was overdoing it. So now I purposely try to be a little bit more reserved with my gesturing, but that's why I have that herb review course. I kind of want to go back and re-record that, because I do a lot of, like, I think it's like a bit excessive and becomes distracting. So I can understand when people are not into the gesturing. Any advice on points to use when a client loses energy easily? Oh, I don't know. I think that's like you have to do a full diagnosis of like easily fatigued could be a lot of different things. Could be spleen Qi deficiency, could be lung Qi deficiency, could be liver blood deficiency. So yeah, you would have to do more of that. I think you need more of a diagnosis. Let's see if there's anything else. I'm not going to grow mutton chops or a mustache. I'm still kind of curious about this needling or bleeding the Jingwell point. So that's why I want to talk to Zach Louis about this, because again, this is something that I use occasionally in clinic, but Zach was one of those people that is like, when you learn something, do only that for a month. So he's like, when I learned back shu points, I treated patients for a month using only back shu points. When I learned 5 shu transport points, I treated patients for a month using only 5 shu. So I think he said 4-point needle technique is his bread and butter. So I kind of want to ask him, like, I think he has a lot more clinical experience with it. So I kind of want to ask him about that. I was just trying to explain if you get a question on a test, here's how you deal with it. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting, I've heard this from a couple people, including some 5-element people. Kind of like maybe an interesting way to put it is, if you go to your Machiocha textbook, the Machiocha Fundamentals textbook, one of the things we learn in Fundamentals is yin bing, the causes of disease, the etiology of disease, what things can cause disease. We have internal causes, external causes, and miscellaneous or non-internal, non-external causes. Turns out one of the miscellaneous causes of disease is improper treatment. That if you give an improper treatment, you can actually cause disease. And that's why we need to be very careful. We need to actually do a pattern diagnosis and not just rely on point prescriptions, because we can actually cause disease by doing an improper treatment. But if I'm remembering correctly, I think one of the things that Machiocha said is when we talk about improper treatment causing disease, this is usually referring to herbal medicine, that usually giving the wrong herbs can actually make a person sick. So if you have a person with spleen Qi deficiency and you give them a large dosage of Huang Lian, you can make them sick. You can make their situation worse. If a person has a lot of heat and you give them Fuzi, you can make their condition worse. So actually your treatment can cause disease. But if I'm recalling this correctly, I think his opinion on the subject was acupuncture cannot cause disease. And I think this would, and I kind of agree with that, because I feel like usually I guess I envision it as the Qi wants to move a certain way. So if you're nudging it in the correct direction, then it will just snap into place and the person will feel better. If you try to nudge it in the wrong direction, it doesn't really want to go there. So if you needle the incorrect points or try to move the chi in an incorrect way, the body's just not going to do it. Like maybe you'll have a headache for a day, but then it should go back to normal. I've heard it said that one of the exceptions to this is 4-point needle technique. That if you do 4-point needle technique, you can force the chi to go in the direction it does not want to go. Or a way J.R. Worsley 5-element person said that normally when you do needles, you're asking the chi to move in a certain way when you just needle normal points. When you do 4-point needle technique, you are not asking the chi to move, you are telling the chi to move. So what that means is, if you have a person with spleen chi deficiency and you do Korean 4-point needle technique to drain the spleen, you will make the patient worse. If a person has liver excess and you use 4-point needle technique to fill the liver, you will make the patient worse. So that's kind of the saying that 4-point needle technique, it sounds very simple because like, oh, you're only using 4 needles and it's a very simple technique. It's actually, if you do it right, if you hit the points correctly, and if you do the tonification and sedation technique correctly, it can be a very strong treatment because you're not asking the chi to move, you're telling the chi, you're forcing the chi to move in a certain way. So you better be correct on your diagnosis and not just do it willy-nilly, because this is a way that you can harm a patient. Sorry, I'm just seeing something and I don't think this is Farsi. I don't know if it's Dari, but I'm sorry, I can't read that script. What about e-stim using on someone with nerve issues like peripheral neuropathy? I don't know. I don't want to say too much about that because I don't want to say the wrong thing. I would say be careful with it. And again, it's like kind of if they have some lack of sensation, then you always want to be careful because they can't necessarily give you feedback about what's going on. So like especially like if someone has numbness on the feet, don't do moxa because they can't tell you if they're burning or not, sort of thing. So I would be careful with it. I feel like maybe I would know people who would do it. So I think that I don't know. So I don't want to say too much about that. Can we do e-stim on 4-point? I don't know. Again, in terms of the clinical application, I'll save these questions and I'll ask Zach about this because I want to talk to him again, and I think he has more clinical application of this, so I'll ask him about this. I don't know. I mean, like e-stim is kind of a more modern technique, so I'm not sure how much people have done it before. And kind of the idea is, remember, we're tonifying and draining. And so when we said there, when we do the 4 points, 2 of those points you tonify, 2 of those points you drain. And I'm not sure if we have specific tonification and draining techniques that involve e-stim. Usually when we talk about tonifying and draining, this is something that like the Neijing and Nanjing kind of disagree about what it means, how you go about tonifying and draining. But we're talking about things like twisting the needle clockwise versus twisting the needle counterclockwise. Lifting and thrusting, do you emphasize the thrusting or do you emphasize the lifting? Different simulation techniques, like when you pull the inhalation versus exhalation, do you needle on the inhale and withdraw on the exhale, or do the opposite? Do you close the point or leave the point open? In the Neijing, those are the techniques of tonification and sedation. In the Nanjing, it talks more about if you want to tonify, you needle to the Wei level and then push the qi into the Ying level. To drain, you needle into the Ying level and pull the qi out to the Wei level so that it can be dispersed. But anyway, I think when we say specifically tonifying and draining, we're talking about specific tonification and draining techniques. I'm not sure if e-stim fits into that, but again, I don't know. I'm talking out my ass right now, so. What if there are pins and needles running up and down? I don't know. Again, this is one of those things where Usually I just do e-stim on like musculoskeletal complaints, so I don't know. I feel like there is an answer somewhere. I'm not sure if there's an e-stim book, but I don't want to say something and tell you the wrong thing. And it could be that there are different opinions. Like when we talk about don't cross the spine, some people are like, oh, you should never cross the spine, and some people do it all the time. I always kind of thought you should never e-stim the skull, like scalp points, but I think I've seen people who e-stim scalp points. So there might be different opinions on that, but there's probably an answer there. But I would talk to someone who does more with e-stim. So I don't want to say something and tell you the wrong thing, and have it, and especially if it ends up affecting your patient. I don't want you to. I say one thing and then you go do it, and then your patient gets worse. So, I don't know what school you're at, but there's probably some people who are experienced or who are more experienced with e-stim that you could talk to about that. If you're at PCOM, talk to Yuan Wong. She's kind of scary. Oh, I shouldn't say. Talk to Yuan Wong. She does a lot of e-stim. I think that's about it. I'm getting tired. Let me know if there are any more questions. Hopefully the thing on that needle technique was good, was helpful. Do you practice now? Actually, since I moved to Colorado, I still don't have a license for Colorado. So the last year or so, I actually haven't been treating patients just because I've been focusing on YouTube stuff and teaching stuff. I actually haven't been treating patients, but I want to get back into that. I'll be honest, I'm kind of burnt out on treating patients. I never really treated that many patients to begin with, but I'm not super excited about treating patients. Apparently people think I'm good at teaching, so I've been kind of focusing more on that. But and because a lot of people have been asking me to make all kinds of videos, so I've been focusing more on that. But in the last year or so, I haven't treated a lot of patients. Basically, it's kind of a thing where I was gonna maybe bring this up on a podcast, and I went and saw Patrick, and he gave me some really good scotch. I mean, it's an expensive bottle. I didn't actually like it. Also, when I was in Kentucky, somebody gave me a bunch of moonshine. So anyway, I was gonna do a thing where I talked to Patrick about this, because Patrick is he's someone who's like very into business, and I am very not into business. And I think that's the thing. It's like I like Chinese medicine. I like doing acupuncture. I do not like doing acupuncture as a business. And I remember talking to someone else before. I think it might have been Drew, but there was somebody else that, like, he was a teacher at my school, and he was really good, and he was really good at ortho, and he was also like knew a bunch of Taoist stuff. He was really good. I thought he was a really good teacher. I thought he was really into it, but he just stopped practicing. And I saw him make a comment on Facebook once where it was kind of the same thing, where it's like he didn't like to do acupuncture as a business. So he said something like, if I get to the point where I can do acupuncture as a hobby, I would totally go back to treating people. And I kind of feel the same way. Where it's like I want to be able to treat patients but not have to treat patients. And that's kind of why I did when I was in California. I was doing a combination of massage and acupuncture, so I kind of felt like massage is really easy to make money with. So it's like massage was paying the bills, and acupuncture was, I considered like a hobby. It was something I was doing for fun. But when it comes to people, like when people talk about like treating 60 patients a week and stuff like that, I'm just not really like marketing and stuff like that. I'm not really interested. It's when people ask me about China, like acupuncture, I don't want to talk about it. When people are like, oh, does acupuncture really work? Tell me about acupuncture. Are there studies for it? I'm like, I don't, like, come in. I'll stick needles in you. Either you get better or you don't. If you get better, come back. If you don't come back. So I'm just, like, I don't like dealing with those types of people. And I think it was especially that both it was both with practice and with teaching at the school. I ran into people with boundary issues, and that's not something I deal with very well either. That I don't know, just people trying to put their shit on you, or like, even I don't know, even if they get better and they like you, people, it's like, I don't want to, like, I'm here to treat you. I'm not your friend. Like, don't text me at weird times. I don't know. So that's the thing, and like, being selective. So now it's kind of like being selective with the patient. Yeah, so I mean, and then part of it is, especially when I was in Kentucky, I saw this a lot. It's like, honestly, I just kind of felt like a lot of my patients don't need acupuncture. Um, it's kind of like I had a lot of patients coming in. I was just kind of like, you just need to, like, you don't need acupuncture. You need to fix your diet. You don't need acupuncture. You need to stretch. You know, like that kind of stuff. So I felt kind of weird being like, I'm doing acupuncture on people. Like, not to be really judgmental, but like, I had this one person come in, and she was coming in with hip pain, and basically what would happen is, there was, she had some ligament things, but basically what would happen is the head of her femur would jam up into her acetab, into her hip joint, and get stuck there, and it would cause pain. It would pinch nerves. She couldn't have full range of motion, basically just because her hip joint was all jammed up. So I'd needle things, loosen it up, and I could yank on her foot and pull it back out. And she was very thankful. She was like, "Oh, it's like, you're so good. You got me out of pain, everything like that. You must feel a lot of fulfillment that you're able to help people in this way." And honestly, again, not to be judgmental, this woman was like 300 pounds. And so I was kind of like, the reason you have these like, basically, bearing that much weight is causing hip problems. And so it made me start to think, like, am I actually helping this person, or am I enabling them to have an unhealthy lifestyle? And so it's like, yes, I'm helping them in the short term, but it turns out they had no interest in losing weight. And so it's like treating the root, like, basically I was treating the branch symptoms of her hip pain. The root cause was just she was bearing too much weight. And so there was really no way to treat the root cause. And so I was just kind of like, am I actually helping this person? I mean, her insurance was really good. And so it was like, she was coming in twice a week. It was a great way to pay my rent. But I was like, am I really helping this person? So I kind of get into that too, where I get things where it's like, to what extent am I helping people? And so that kind of got me burnt out on seeing patients. So that's why it's, so I guess for one thing, it's like, I don't want to have to convince people to come in. So I'd rather see people that like actually want to come in, and I want to be like actually helping people. And I feel like now I'm around a community of people that is like, I want to help them. So I'm probably going to get more back into it, just because, not because I want to do acupuncture as a business, not because I want to make money and have acupuncture pay my rent. It turns out I might be selling enough review courses to do that. I want to be in a place where it's like, here's this community of people. They have these issues. I have the tools to help them. How can I help them? And I want to do that. So I think about it more that that's kind of why I want to get back into treating people. But this idea of like people seeing 60 patients a week, I don't want to do that. Do you have any topical herb for eczema? Yeah, I can't remember if I have a video on Qingdai. It kind of depends on what we're talking about too. Are we talking about like acute, chronic, things like that? Um, because it's sometimes the thing with like, if it's like a chronic eczema where it's like this has been going on for the past 10 years, there's like probably something internal going on, and you probably need to do internal herbs to fix the root. But in terms of like acute cases or flare-ups, I don't know if I have a video on this. But you can look up the formula, the Qingdai as a topical. That was something I would do as like a thing. That's something I would do kind of as what do you call it, demonstration for some of my herbs classes when we got to the heat toxicity category. Qingdai-san. So this is only if you have the Bensky formula book. This is Qingdai-san, and so this is kind of an interesting that you can make as a topical. So it's acute eczema, contact dermatitis, allergic dermatitis. So like that means like poison ivy, poison oak, things like that. Urticaria hive. So this is something that says treats any skin condition that presents with weeping, erosion, heat, swelling, and itching and pain. So Qingdai is indigo. That's in the heat toxicity category. That's a powder, so it already comes as a powder. Shurgao is in the drained fire category, but turns out we can grind it into a powder and use it topically. So you can use, it's better to use the prepared version. They call it Shu Shurgao, prepared Shurgao, or Duan Shurgao, calcined Shurgao. It's basically, it's heated up and it's easier to pound into a powder. Hua Shur is talcum. That's in the, so is it drain fire or heat toxicity? That's the one that also clears summer heat. I think it's in the heat toxicity category. Huang Bai is in the damp heat category. So these are just herbs that are good for clearing heat toxicity and clearing dampness. So especially if there's like some wetness or dampness, then this is just all information from the Bensky formula book. So that's something like would be fun to make topically. So, but again, that would be more for like an acute presentation. I feel like if it's happening chronic, like at least a lot of the eczema I've seen has been like, this has been going on since I was a child, and sometimes it gets better and sometimes it gets worse, but it's been going on as a child. It's like you probably need to address the internal causes as well. For topical things, I think there's somebody, if you like don't like, that's like if you wanted to like mix the herbs together and make something for fun because you like using raw herbs, that's something you can make. If you want something already prepared, somebody makes a thing called Emily's Skin Soothers. Maybe look that up. They might have something for eczema. They make a few different types of creams and stuff like that. I think they have a few different products. So I vaguely know the person who, I shouldn't say I know, I've heard of the person who makes these. So you can check here and see if there's anything that, I think they have a couple different products and one of them might be good for eczema. Maybe you could ask one of them. Yeah, because like eczema. So that's a possibility if you want something already made. For skin problems, if you want to do internal things, look for somebody. I feel like the best dermatologists are people who are Mason or Mazin certified. So let me grab this book. So this book that everybody uses, A Manual of Acupuncture. I guess it's not going to focus on it. Everybody refers to this as the Deadman because it's written by Peter Deadman. The second author on this book is Mazin Al-Khafaji, is the author that nobody remembers. People just call it the Deadman, but there was another one that's Mazin Al-Khafaji. Here, I'll give you the Emily Skin Soothers link. Anyway, apparently he does... he's really good at dermatology, and so he actually like has his own school or system, and so you can look for people who are Mazin certified for dermatology, and they do a lot with internal herbs, and they get very good results. So if you're looking for if it's like something for you personally, or if you want to recommend out, look for someone who is Mazin certified. Surely they have like a list of them somewhere, but look for someone who's Mazin certified, and they specialize in dermatology, and they get very good results using custom raw formulas. So all the people I've known who've done that, I've been very impressed with their results. So if you're interested in dermatology, I'd look up look up Mazin or Mazin. I don't know how to say his name, sorry. But that's who I'd go to for dermatological things. Okay, it's been an hour and a half. It's 8:30. I'm losing my voice. If there's anything else, we might just call it a night. Sorry, again, like I've I've been doing a lot of other stuff. So there haven't been a lot of videos for the last couple weeks because I was ootin' a boot in Kentucky and cleaning up tornadoes. I think I'm doing some chainsaw work this weekend and next weekend and doing some of that kind of stuff. So there hasn't been a lot of... So that's why I haven't been doing videos for the last couple weeks. I wanted to get back to it this week, but it turns out I'm backed up on a whole bunch of stuff. So there's probably not going to be anything else this week. Hopefully we'll get things going again next week because I kind of wanted to go through all the point stuff, do point categories and stuff like that. And I still need to get, I think I'm behind on herbs now too. I was going to try to do one category per week. I think I'm behind on herbs now too. So kind of the plan for the rest of this week is, what I was going to do is I have some stuff that I still need to edit. So I think there might be one herb video I need to edit, and that video on the secondary channels I was going to edit and maybe write some tests and upload some handouts for those videos as well. So those will be on the website. So that's what I was going to try to finish up this week. It could be that I'm going to be doing too much stuff. I might not get that up for a while, just the way things are going this week. So sorry I'm a little bit behind on that. Have fun with your cat. And yeah, it's like I saw some cat paws coming out from under my bedroom door. Don't use them together. Yeah, I had a this is back like when I first got the cat. I had a picture on Facebook where it's like I was like sharpening a chainsaw and the cat like came up and started pawing at it and stuff like that. I was like, kitty, don't climb on chainsaws. He's like trying to lay down on a chainsaw. And it was like, I remember I was like drilling something and he like started pawing at the drill as it was running. So kitty does not have very good regard for safety protocols around power tools. So basically the plan is to try to edit some of those things, and then hopefully we'll get back onto that schedule of basically what I was trying to do is do live streams of different classes and try to get things up that way. So trying to do one acupuncture and one herb thing per week. So we'll try to get back on that. But it looks like I'm behind, and I don't know if I'm going to catch up. So that's why we only did one live stream today, this week. Because I still need... I have to do taxes. Yeah, I have a bunch of other, like, some automobile stuff and some taxes stuff too. So I don't know, maybe I'll have to take time off to do taxes too. Okay, at this point I'm rambling. I'm going to go eat some lasagna. I think the series finale of Boba Fett came out, so I'm gonna go do that. Oh, speaking of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian, if you like t-shirts, besides all that, there's also the This Is the Way t-shirt. There are two versions of the This Is the Way t-shirt, so I think Mandalorian might be starting up soon. So if you're into the Mandalorian, you can get a This Is the Way t-shirt. I think it's funny, I made this t-shirt, like, I feel like this is like the lamest t-shirt design. And actually I think it was Mallory texted me and was like, that's the lamest t-shirt design. I was like, yeah, I think so too. Apparently a lot of people have been buying it though, so I think that's kind of funny. But so if you want to support the website, that's a way you can do it, is get t-shirts and other stuff. You know, we have it on mugs. I have a little wine tumbler that tote bags and stuff like that. So that's another way you can support the website, is buying the merchandise. Or, as always, thank you to the Patreon members for supporting the website. I know I haven't been doing a lot with the Patreon channel, but thank you for, so it's really like, there's really nothing special about the Patreon. There's really like no special content. It's not like you're like getting a paywall to to get the magical things. It's not like the rest of the channels are up on the Patreon website. If you want to join the Patreon, it's just a way to support things so I can keep doing this, because if I can't pay my rent, I'm going to stop making videos and I'm going to do something else. So thank you for doing that. If you don't want to join the Patreon, there are one-time donations through Buy Me a Coffee. Some people have been doing that because Patreon is like a monthly thing. Buy Me a Coffee is like a one-time thing. So if you'd rather do a one-time thing, you can do that. There's merchandise on the store. There's also the review courses, single herb review course and formula review course. Those help things out. It occurred to me this afternoon that I sent out an email about this live stream, but I forgot to post about it on Instagram and Facebook. So sometimes I do it the other way around. So if you want to know when things are happening, there's a link to the email list below. You can sign up for the email list. You can also follow on Instagram or Facebook. And between one of those things, you'll probably figure out what's happening. So join the email list, follow on Instagram, buy a t-shirt because I think they're funny. Trying to think if there's anything else. Send me some peanut M&Ms. I have a P.O. box that I never use, so send me some peanut M&Ms. Actually, don't send me peanut M&Ms. I still haven't lost my holiday weight, so don't send me peanut M&Ms. But with that, I like it just because I like the Star Wars shows. I don't think it's the greatest thing in the world, but I enjoy watching them. So, I don't know, yeah. I mean, I think it's worth watching. I don't know. I was going to say, I like the TV. I mean, I feel like, so there are TV shows, and I do really like the cartoon shows, the Clone Wars and Rebels. And I guess what I'd say about that is, I feel like when they make Star Wars movies, like one of the problems with the sequels, everyone's complaining about the sequel trilogy. And I think one of the things you have to understand about the prequels and the sequels is when they were making the Star Wars sequels, I don't think it was just about telling a story about Star Wars. And so you have to kind of understand the position that Disney was in, as that they wanted to do something like, basically, like these movies cost a lot of money. They need to bank back that money, not only in America, but also in the foreign market. And when we say foreign market, we mean China. They have to make money in China. And so I feel like the goal of those movies wasn't necessarily to tell a Star Wars story. The goal of the sequel trilogy was to do something that could satisfy the people who are already fans, but also they needed to bring in a new generation of fans, because 40-year-old neckbeards like me only gets them so far. They needed to bring in a new generation. They needed to bring newer audiences, both in age and in gender and things like that. So they needed to create a movie that would appeal to a wide variety. They needed to appeal to long-time fans, but they also needed to appeal to people who had never seen Star Wars before. So they were trying to accomplish all of these goals all at once, and that made it difficult to make a good movie. But anyway, so when we get into these Star Wars TV shows, they're trying to appeal to a much smaller audience. We're not trying to appeal to both 10-year-old girls and people in China and 40-year-old neckbeards all at the same time. They're kind of like focusing on the people who are already Star Wars fans. And so I think that's why I feel like they tell better stories, because it's more Star Warsy than trying to appeal to everybody. Sorry if I inadvertently said something very offensive in the last 5 minutes of this rant. I'm kind of tired and not sure what I'm saying. But I feel like with the Clone Wars, with Star Wars Rebels, with Mandalorian, Boba Fett, with the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that's coming out, it's more that because they're not trying to appeal to this broader audience, they can have the opportunity to go deeper into the lore and deeper into the storytelling. And it's not like when Darth Maul appears and Han Solo, people are like, "Who are that? Why is he here? Didn't he get cut in half?" It's like if you like are really into Star Wars, you know what's going on with Darth Maul, and it's really exciting. So in that sense, I do really like TV shows, because we're going into we're kind of doing that. It's more like a show that's made for Star Wars fans rather than a movie that's made to appeal to as wide of an audience as possible. So I like it for that. Is it the best thing in the world? Not really. Is it better storytelling than the prequels and the sequels? Yeah, pretty much. But that's it. So yeah, so that's why it's like, it's worth watching, is what I would say. It comes on, and it's worth watching. I'm not sure I've like gone back and rewatched The Mandalorian 5 times, but it's fun when it comes out. So I would go ahead and I would do that. I'm not sure I would, like, if you don't have Disney Plus, I'm not sure I would pay the money for Disney Plus just to watch Boba Fett, but I like it. Okay, it's getting late. I'm gonna go. I need to go free my cat. My cat kind of freaks out at night when I try to go to bed, so I need to like exercise him a little bit before I go to bed. Okay. Hopefully that was good. Hopefully you got something out of that. Join the email list. I'll see you next time. I think this pillow is really cute too. I'm glad I put it on a pillow too. Like, don't you think it would be good, like, in your clinic waiting room, like on your couch, you could have like a dorky little pillow with a unicorn on it, with a pink unicorn. Is it unicorn pink? It's kind of pink. With a pink unicorn on it. I think it's really cute. I have I used to have Baby Yoda in my video. Yes, it's somebody. This is one of my patients in San Diego actually gave me this the bobblehead Chewbacca with a porg. So yeah, I got my porg up there and my Baby Yoda up there. So I have to get those out. Usually I have them like sitting back here. So I might have to get my Baby Yoda out again now that Grogu has come back. So. Okay, I'm just rambling at this point. Go to bed. See you next time.